Layoffs climbing in the month of October as hiring slows down. There's a new report out. It's from Challenger Grain Christmas, and it found job cuts climbing by more than 175% when we compare it to October of last year. Worst we've seen since 2003 as we bring in Doug Flynn on this. And, you know, obviously that's a rough headline and what we know is a rough job market, but getting worse, I guess.
Yeah, these are announcements. I think we need to make that clear. They haven't actually been job layoffs. The job layoff numbers, actually, even in the Fed shutdown, we still get, because a lot of those are put out by the states, and so those weekly jobless claims have not started ramping up. We would see that. So the announcements are very worrisome because it's what's coming. It hasn't actually happened yet, and so that's the precursor that when we talk about the Fed looking at both the inflation and the labor market, this is the big concern, moving away from inflation over to the labor market. We've got some issues here for a whole host of reasons we've spoken about, and it's going to start coming through into those weekly jobless claims.
Well, we always talk about the Federal Reserve having this dual mandate, and it's tough because they got to deal with both sides of this. A labor market that there are obvious concerns about, inflation that's still at issue. We actually had a story today that I wanted to ask you about anyway, where analysts are warning about something they're calling sneakflation, quote unquote, because more companies are basically hiding or trying to hide price increases, and it's been around for decades, as that Washington Times article says, but it's intensified at hotels, airlines, restaurants, grocery stores, video streaming services over the last number of years to offset the rising labor costs. So what would you say about prices, again, versus jobs? That's what the Fed has to deal with.
Yeah, and so you remember we had shrinkflation under when Biden, and so this is another version. Actually, sneakflation's been around a long time, but it definitely has resurrected. You see it like when instead of getting 2 bags for free, you get 1. Now you got to pay for seats. These things are creeping in there, and you know those things have translated into immense amounts of earnings to the companies. So like airlines have never made more money on baggage fees than they have in their life, and so that's offsetting some of the increase in costs and things. And so it's not a direct in-your-face announcement of raising costs. That's why it's sneakflation. They're sneaking them in there, here and there. They're doing more ads on the free streaming services, all these things that they're doing to raise some revenue and try to keep them from actually raising overall costs. But that's effectively what happens. And you just have to know that this is here, it's staying, and you got to watch for it because sometimes it is sneaky, and that's in the word.
You know, it's kind of interesting to have these kind of headlines on the same day, where we're going to talk a little bit more about this later in the show. But of course, the Elon Musk story of the day is how he could have his pay package like worth just about $1 trillion, right? And first of all, you sometimes push back when people make a big deal about how much quote unquote money someone like him makes. So would you do that in this case as well? Is there like context for this, or?
I would give you some context. And you know, here's the first thing you have to realize is when you own shares of Tesla directly, you get to vote. But a lot of where these shares are held are in these big, if you own them in your 401k, those votes are done by BlackRock and these other companies. So they're lobbying them to pass this. But what it comes down to is it's metrics, right? So Tesla's worth $1.5 trillion as a company right now. In order for Elon to get this $1 trillion pay package, there's these tranches every $500 billion or so where he'll get a piece. And so you'd have to take Tesla up to a $8.5 trillion valuation for him to get the full trillion. So the quick answer is, if he grows your Tesla shares 6 times,
you'll be happy about it too.
So do you share a trill for Elon? Maybe. I think, it's ridiculous to say that. But the point is, they're worried that if he isn't focused here, he's going to take all the AI and robotics, take it to other companies and not be engaged. And it's not going to be an $8.5 trillion company. So the only way you get that is to keep it engaged. And there's that. I don't know if any of that is attainable. And then he probably won't make the $1 trillion. But he doesn't take a salary. And so this is his way. And it's an incentive.
Yeah, but it hits the people like that. Back to the conversation we've been having. The people who are relying on their salaries are the people that are struggling, and now people who, obviously, he's the biggest example. There are far more that are relying on their investments or not. Thank you, Doug. It's 4 p.m. Eastern.